What's going on, guys and gals? This is Autotech. So the 1K in a day has come and gone. That's definitely old news now, but it has given me some time to reflect. Now, that wasn't like, you know, I wouldn't use the term like that was the longest ride by far, because like I've done several like 1,300 to 1,400 kilometer days. It was just pushing through for that final like 300 to 400. That was definitely the challenge of it. And you know, if you watch the video, the whole thing, the Angry Ginger and I are kind of talking about it as we go, like what happened to the time, like where, you know, like we just started falling behind, stuff started, like it just started getting late in the day, and it was like, I don't understand why. So now that I've had a little bit of time to kind of like reflect on it and stuff, I've definitely got some tips for you guys when it comes to planning like a long distance rally event, or if you're going to do the Iron Butt Association, or even the Ride 1K in a day like we did. I guess the absolute first tip that I could give you guys would be don't bite off more than you can chew. And what I mean by that is it like everything takes training, you know, like you can't just jump right into something and just nail it, right? So, and what I mean by that is like if you've been riding for a little bit, or even if you've been riding for a long time, but the furthest you've ever gone is, you know, like 300-400 miles, like 600 kilometers kind of thing, and that was like a full day deal for you, and you were like, oh man, like I'm a badass biker now, and oh, look at me go, I covered so much ground, and you were dying by the end of it. I mean, don't go and like jump right off and go after a 1K in a day, you know, because that's just a recipe for disaster. And if you start pushing yourself too much and you start getting fatigued, that's when mistakes happen, you know. Like, it doesn't sound realistic, but like you could actually fall asleep on the bike quite easily. Maybe not as easy as in a car, but you know, you get into that like comfortable state, you're just kind of droning down the highway, and it was, you know, it'd be very easy just to close your eyes for a second, like they feel so dry, I just need to close them. So, you know, do a little bit of training, like you know, you don't have to like work right up to 1,000 miles in a day, but if you have never done, say, 700 miles in a day, maybe start with pursuing that as a goal, and then you know, to push that extra 4 hours from there isn't as hard as adding an additional 600 miles to a day that you've never done before. The next thing would probably be set yourself up for success, and what I mean by that is pick your route carefully. Now I know it's all about the ride, not the destination, man. I'm all about those twisties and just taking it all in and stuff, but you're gonna fail. That's what the point of that is right there. Is you know, I picked our route, you know, with some speed limits in consideration. Like, let's put something into perspective for you. The route that we did, the slowest speed limit was 110 kilometers an hour, which is, let's say, 65 miles an hour, something like that. So, you know, you're moving at that kind of speed, and you know, just little things kind of started getting to us, like you know, being delayed at the border for 20 minutes, getting held up at that one town in Washington for 30 minutes because of the road closing. You know, just like little stuff like that kind of adds time, but for the most part, you know, we were not traveling at a rate less than, like, say, 120 kilometers an hour, which would be like, what, like 70 miles an hour or something. So, and where I was going with, like, to put it into perspective for you is if you choose a route that is like super windy, 2-lane road, I'm going to take in all the scenery, you know, chances are your top speed is maybe going to be 100 kilometers an hour. you know, at best, and you're going to have to do a lot of passing, and there's going to be a lot of delays, and like all that right there just like really adds up the time. So, you know, it's going to set you up for failure there. Just to give a little story behind that, the Angry Ginger and I last summer took this super scenic route all along the bottom of BC, and like it was great. We put, like, our very first day, we put in like a solid 14 hours, and we only made it 900 kilometers. So that's what, like 500 miles or something. Like, we didn't even make 600 miles, and it was like, and we were beat by the end of it, because I mean, it was like hot, like it was, you know, like mid 90s, like what would that be, Celsius? That'd be like mid 30s, high 30s and stuff. So it was like, it was a long day, and that was all that we were able to cover because of that route, because it was all roads like this, you know. Like right now, this is like an 80 zone, and it's super scenic, and if it was later in the day, you better believe there'd be motorhomes and stuff, and you can only pass so much. Like I've dealt with this with people that I know that they're just like, yeah, but like my bike's retarded fast, so like won't be an issue. Yeah, that's cool, but I mean, you can't maintain 200 kilometers an hour with, you know, like, and get places. Like, yeah, you could do your little spurts here and there, but you know, if you're blowing through a national park and you're doing double and a bit the speed limit, you're not going to complete your task, because they're going to radio ahead and your bike's going into the impound. And I mean, even places that are more chill, like Montana and stuff, I bet you if you were, you know, doing 100 and something miles an hour down the highway, they're going to make sure you have a bad day. So when you're planning your route, it's not necessarily about the ride, it's about covering the miles and hitting your checkpoints. You know, if you want some examples, take a look at some of the routes of the guys that have did like Ride 48 and 10 or something like that, or I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like you got to do all 48 states, lower states, in 10 days. And I mean, like, these guys are crafty with their destinations. Like, some of the states, they're literally like crossing the line into a gas station, getting their receipt, and then they're coming right back out. And it's like, that's what you got to do when it comes to a relay event like that. So that was a very, very, very long-winded explanation of picking a route. But as you can see, like, that is a very important aspect of making sure you are set for success. Next, you know, but definitely not least, is making sure your bike's in good mechanical condition. Stuff happens, you know, like that's a long day. That's a lot of running time on your engine. You're going through a lot of heat. You know, there's stuff like that is hard work on an engine to be like running for 1,000 miles straight. And you know, if your bike is questionable and every third day or whatever, it might not start for you. It might not be the bike to want to take on something like that. You don't have to have like a brand new bike like I did to do it. You know, definitely not. But even take a look at the Angry Ginger's bike. Like, I maintained that thing very well, and a clip on his foot peg broke halfway through, and it was just like, well, what the hell? Like, that's not something you'd think to check, you know? Like, yeah, you make sure your pegs are on, but you're not going to see if there's like a crack in a clip or something like that. So that right there added another like 20 to 30 minutes right there, trying to find a parts store, dealing with the lineup in the parts store, and then getting the stuff and getting your bike back on the road. So, you know, and his bike's definitely not under-maintained by any means. So, and I've read other people's stories of, you know, they got 3 hours into the sundown part, and then suddenly their lights stopped working, and it was like, oh, sweet. You know, how do you cover some miles on a highway at night if you don't have any headlights? So make sure your bike's in good shape and well-maintained. If you've got halogen bulbs and stuff like that, it might not necessarily be a bad idea just to keep like one spare headlight bulb with you. Like signal lights are kind of, yeah, whatever. Those are more of a legality than anything. But as long as if your bike has dual headlights or even just one headlight bulb might not be a bad thing to take with you. This thing has got LED bulbs, so I mean, I'd kind of be screwed on that one. But luckily, I'd have the fog lights, so I could slow her down, still keep going, wouldn't be the end of the world. The next thing I'd probably suggest is like proper gear and layers. Now, I don't mean like proper gear like AT-GAT, but you're going to be covering a lot of ground, and depending on if you're just going to do a big circle or something like that, you're probably going to be coming through a lot of different climate zones. So you got to be ready to deal with everything that kind of comes your way. Like the Angry Ginger and I, we got started at about 6 in the morning, and when we were just leaving, it was like 10 degrees Celsius. So it was not warm by any means, and like, what would that be? That'd be like, what, like 45 Fahrenheit or something like that. So it's brisk. So, all right, you layer up, you're ready for that. Now, as we progressed, suddenly we ended up at mid-Montana there, and now it was like 37 degrees Celsius. That's huge. Like, that is a massive jump in temperature in a 7-hour span, and you're still exposed in the elements. So like, that would be like high 90s, I believe, in Fahrenheit. So yeah, that's real great and all that you live in Nevada or Southern Cali and 95% of your day is at 100 degrees. But when you're dealing with that huge swing, that's when it gets hard on you, you know, because so we started out in the morning and like we were cold, you know, like we dressed up and stuff, but it's like it still kind of starts to soak through and get you to the bones. And then suddenly, you know, a matter of 6 hours later, now we're like sweating and dying, and it's like, holy crap, like, oh man, I'm melting. It feels like my heated seats are on, because it's like, oh man. And then so going from a swing like that, like it tires you out is what happens there. And then we were progressing into the evening, and we were getting into the Snoqualmie Pass, and now it's dropped down to like 14 degrees, which was warmer than when we started, but it was cold to finish because we had just spent the whole day in hot temperatures. So I probably should have brought some extra stuff with, because I'm really bad for just kind of toughing it out. Like, oh, I'll let the day warm me up. It's not a big deal. But which it was fine if we had been stopping at dinner time. But then it was like we kept going, and then the temperature dropped back down, and now we're freezing. So, you know, you definitely got to bring different layers. Like, what else would I have brought? Probably a jacket, because I just went with like some layers under my hoodie to try and keep me warm. But I probably should have had a jacket for when the sun went down, because it wouldn't have let as much air through. Or I should have kept wearing my rain gear jacket, one of the two, you know, just something more once the sun went down. And speaking of rain gear, you know, we had thoroughly checked everywhere that we had to go, and there wasn't any rain forecasted anywhere. And then we hit that huge storm just by like Moses Lake there, and it was like it hit fast and heavy, right? Like all the batteries were dead, unfortunately, but it was like you could see a brick wall, and we were kind of like looking. We didn't have any centers to communicate, and then it was like you just started coming up to it, and it was like, oh man, we got to pull over and do something about this. And it was like by the time we got the rain gear on, we were soaked. So that doesn't help for the getting cold once the sun goes down, you know. Another thing to consider would be, and this is like mainly a me thing, but I think a lot of people probably relate to it, is like, don't burn yourself out right in the very beginning. And specifically, like I call it ass burn, or burning your ass. And anybody who's done some like longer days is going to know exactly what I'm talking about. You get to that point where it's like the skin on your butt gets raw. Like, it's not necessarily raw per se, but it's like it hurts. The skin hurts, and I call it like butt burn or saddle burn or whatever. And it's like you get to this point where it's like you gotta get off the bike because you've been sitting in the same spot, and it's like, oh man, it's like almost like you're getting a bed sore. So, and I find my happy place to avoid that is about an hour and a half to 2 hours. If I push through the 2 hour mark, it starts to really burn, and then it's like I've gone past the point of fixing it. you know, because like at about an hour and a half, it's like my skin will start to hurt, but I can like move around a little bit, and it'll be okay if I stop soon and at least stretch my legs, have a smoke and drink or something like that, and then I'm good to go for about another hour and a half. But if I just sit down and I'm like, ugh, I gotta go, and I like push through for three hours, I'm just like, my skin's just killing me. It's like I've now wrecked my ass for the day. As funny as that sounds. Like, it's just so, if you're really gung-ho at the start of an event like that, and you're like, I'm only stopping when I need fuel. Cool, great, but I guarantee you by about the 7th hour, you're going to be riding like slightly hovering off your seat, because now your skin's so sore you can't sit down any longer. It's not like riding in a truck or something like that, which, I mean, you still get it in a truck, like if you just kind of sit there in one position. But the nice thing about that is you can kind of set the cruise control and you know, kick your feet off to the one side, or like sit sideways in your seat, but you can't really do that on a bike. I mean, you can kind of sit on the side like this, but you're still getting the one cheek, so it's like, you know, you got to pick your battle there, and kind of give each side a break, I suppose. But yeah, so, you know, back to that is just don't push too hard right at the very beginning and then just ruin yourself for later, because that won't be fun. So and another thing would definitely be remember that everything adds up at the end of the day. When you're doing a long event, every 10 minutes adds up at the end of a 24-hour span, and that's not always a good thing. This was kind of our demise. Like, yeah, we completed it and stuff, but we didn't exactly set any records with time. Like, so the border crossing, for example, like that was like 20-25 minutes. So that right there was like equivalent to 3 stops for fuel and a drink, right there. And it's like, crap, you know. And then the trying to deal with the parts store stuff, like that right there was like another like 20 minutes of delays. So everything adds up is what I'm kind of getting at here. So, you know, I've ridden with people that it's like, you know, they want to have coffee at like every gas station, and they want to wander around, and they want to take photos, and they want to go and pet those cows over there and stuff like that. And it's all fine and dandy, but I mean, if every hour you're stopping for 20 minutes, you are not going to make it. Unfortunately, that's just the way that goes. Because we definitely didn't screw around, like, for the most part. Like, we would stop, get fuel, smoke, go. So that would be like 7 minutes maybe, and then we would, you know, stop, fuel, small coffee, smoke, go. So that would be like 20 minutes right there, because, like, you know, every second or third stop you would definitely need like that extra couple of minutes just to kind of get some blood flowing and stuff like that. And then I don't know, every 5 hours or so, like, we would actually like eat something, you know, like we had a burger at McDonald's. So that was like 20 minutes. So, like, we definitely weren't doing like big sit-down dinners or taking photos or reading tourist attractions and stuff like that. Like, we were stop and going, and, you know, we were making haste. But we ended up being close to 6 hours behind our goal by the end of the day. And when I look back at that video, like, and I'm looking at each stop, like, I think we only did like, it was like 11 stops or something like that over the course of 1,000 miles. Like, that's really not bad at all. Like, that was only a stop every, my math ain't working at the moment, so we're gonna go to kilometers. We only stopped like every 150 kilometers ish, so it's, you know, we weren't exactly stopping at every town we came across, but as you can see, we ended up being close to 6 hours behind schedule for a 60 mile an hour or 100 kilometer an hour average. And about the only thing, like, now that I'm like looking back at it, about the only thing I can really truly think of to avoid that would be to avoid a border crossing, would be a big one. You know, don't have any sort of mechanical issues, and I guess, like, I don't know, put it, how do you know though with your rain gear, right? Because we weren't supposed to come across any rain, and it was fairly sunny, and then suddenly it was just like poof, this random, you know, storm. So it's like, how do you know at that point? You don't, right? So it's not like at the previous stop we could have put our rain gear on, because that adds about 10-15 minutes right about there, right? Because, you know, you got to pull it out of your bag, do the little hopscotch thing to get it on, and then, you know, you're good to go from there. But yeah, it's tough, right? Everything starts to add up at the end of the day, and 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there ends up being 4 hours at the end of the day, right? You know, and then you add in 20 minutes at a border and 20 minutes at a parts store, and well, here we go. That's why we're 6 hours behind. There is definitely no particular order to these tips, so don't think of them as like a number one, this is the most important. I just kind of threw them out there as I was thinking about them. So, you know, and there's definitely other things that I'm missing, like, absolutely. So, I mean, you guys should definitely throw your suggestions into the comment section, so that if people come across this in the future, they have stuff to help them plan. And you know, speaking of planning, phones don't always work in the mountains. So if you're relying heavily on your phone and GPS and stuff like that, well, GPS will probably work, but your phone GPS may not always work. So keep that in mind if you've got a ton of turns as you're going through like mountainous areas. Again, that kind of comes back to the planning your route. Like us, we basically had like 3 turns. Get on Highway 2 South, which turns into, what was it, like I-15, and then we turned on to 90, and it was like, all right, here we go. So, you know, like 3 or 4 turns, and we were at our destination. I hope some of this will help you guys out in the future, and I really hope that some of you guys will definitely try and take them on. From my personal experience, I can tell you that Ride 1K in a Day was a lot more chill than the Iron Butt Association. Just take a look at their rules and the stuff you've got to submit, and you've got to have witnesses, and it was far too regimental for me, so I chose not to participate in their event. Whereas Ride 1K in a Day, it was like some photos, receipts, keep them updated, you're good to go. Great, you know, like that's much more chill than you know, having to download maps and checkpoints and get witnesses, and it's like, come on, man, like, you know, there's really no ways to like truly cheat at an event like that. So I don't know why they have to be so hardcore about it, but whatever, you know. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know it was definitely very long-winded, and I am sorry about that. If you guys have suggestions, like stuff that I missed, or stuff that you do or are thinking of doing to help yourself with success, please make sure you put it below, because you know, when people come across this type of stuff in the future, it's always handy for them to see other people's experiences. And that's kind of what this is all about, right? Is, you know, helping each other achieve goals, learning from each other's mistakes and stuff like that. And not cutting yourself really close, cutting in front of a truck like that, but we made her. So if you enjoyed this, make sure you go on and hit that subscribe button. I hope you do. And thanks again for taking the time and watching.